Hello. All right. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? My name is Crispina French. I am a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm going to kind of just chill here for a moment because it's not quite 4 o'clock yet. And I don't know if you guys have been around all week, but I had scheduled a live session at noon earlier today and was having a really hard time getting my Facebook to live stream. So here we are, and I'm so excited to be here. While we're waiting and getting up to speed, pop a comment in there. Let me know, where are you guys tuning in from? Where's home for you? Texas. All right. I'm in Massachusetts, Western Mass, and it's a beautiful wintry day. We've had a fair amount of snow lately, so that's really fun. I love snow. And yesterday we had some people tuning in from Australia. It was kind of crazy because it was like the middle of the night where they are, and super awesome to have them there. The UK. Yeah, let me know. Joanne Richards, can I still see the class about Tuesday's class about making the loom? Yeah, so this is day number 3 in a 4-day mini series called the Potholder Rug Lab. And we're talking all about making your very own potholder rugs. I have a couple samples here to show you if this is new to you and you're just tuning in for the first time. This is a potholder rug, and you are not going to believe it, but it's made out of 100% recycled, discarded clothing. So pretty cool, right? Yeah, so we're going to learn about that. And the classes that I've been teaching are all, they're live. They're here on Facebook. And if you are on my email list, which is accessible at a link that I posted earlier, I'll post it again after the live. If you join the Potholder Rug Lab email list, I've been sending out emails each evening with a recording of that day's session, along with a PDF to help you just kind of consolidate all the information from that particular day. So you can totally watch Tuesdays, you can watch Mondays and Tuesdays. If this is your first time tuning in for the Potholder Rug Lab, not to worry, you're not too late. You can totally join in with the previous classes and get caught up if that's of interest. So yeah, you just want to hop on that email list, and I'll send that out to you guys. And the cool thing is that tomorrow, Friday, will be our final class in the mini series, and it will kick off an offer that I have for you guys for a 5-week deep dive into potholder rug making. It's a master class. There'll be no stone left unturned. We'll touch upon every single last detail about how I make really beautiful potholder rugs. They're, finishing those edges, getting all the little minute details that are a little bit more involved than I can teach here in these short sessions. So that will be an awesome, fun thing for you guys, and also for me. I love teaching and I love spending time, especially during this COVID winter that we're all experiencing, to have a creative distraction that is productive and beneficial to all of us. And there'll be, just to kind of give you a little outline of that, there'll be weekly modules that are recorded. There'll be live Q&A with me each Saturday. And there'll also be a private online group where you can troubleshoot with each other and just kind of connect with people who are working toward the same goal. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's called the Potholder Rug Masterclass, and again, it kicks off Monday morning bright and early, and the offer will be live tomorrow from noon until midnight on Sunday, when our registration will shut down in preparation for our start on Monday morning. So again, if you missed any classes, you could get on the email list. So I just want to see this question. Wait, hold on. Somebody's asking me a question. How do I find the PDFs? I haven't seen them for the emails. So the emails send you, if you're on the list and you're confused, and actually I've been getting this question a lot, the emails send you a link, and the link is to a blog that I've been putting together that is just for the Potholder Rug Lab. So in that blog, and each day there's a new post, in that blog you will find a link to a PDF and also a link to the recording of today's session. Okay, so that is, yes, Cheryl Gordon, you've got it going on, girl. She knows that you got to click through to the blog post. Okay, so let's get started. I think it's just a little bit after 4, so I'm excited to talk to you today. We're going to talk about all things materials. And as I started saying, these rugs are made from 100% recycled used clothing. And there's a little story, there's a little backstory to how they came about that I shared on the first day, but I'll just touch upon it quickly again. And that is that back in 1990, I started saying 2000, but it was like actually 30 years ago, 31 years ago, holy moly. I was running a production company that I started as a college student, and I had all these different products that I was making. I was doing blankets, mittens, hats, scarves, clothing, all kinds of clothing, kids' clothes, and I was making these little stuffed toys called ragamuffins. And there was this kind of building pile of materials that were not suitable for any of the products that we were producing. And you know, I donated them to different like art programs at the local schools, and I gave some to friends who were textile artists that were in need of different textural stuff. And over time it became apparent that that kind of giving and wasn't addressing the real issue. And not only was the pile building, but it was also costing me and my business quite a bit of money. So one day I came into my studio. It was a Saturday, if I remember, and it was kind of like quiet. There weren't too many people around, and I just had this kind of creative epiphany where I put together this loom, this kind of a loom out of they weren't recycled, they were canvas stretchers. And I banged in like super bendy, not very sturdy, finishing nails all around the edge of these canvas stretchers, and I made the very first potholder rug known to planet Earth. And I actually have that very first rug. I'm going to show it to you quick. I made it in sections. This is it right here. And this rug is 31 years old. And as you can see, it's in really good shape. It's been in my life for a very long time. It did a stint as a nursery rug in my son's bedroom when he was just a baby. It lives in my office. They're super durable, obviously, and you could easy care. You can wash them in the wash machine and dryer. If they're large, you definitely want to take them to like an industrial washing machine at a laundromat or a place like that. But long story short, it was very apparent to me from the very beginning, after that first rug was made, that there was a market and it was really going to address this issue that I was having of this material that wasn't suitable for the other products I was making because it had holes and stains and it was misshapen, or like pieces of garments, or they were like the wrong type of fiber content, which at the time I was working predominantly with wool and cashmere. So if I had sweaters that came in with the raw material I was buying by the tractor trailer load, 24,000 pounds at a time. Oh my goodness. Oftentimes there was just mistakes, garments that were polyester or acrylic or whatever, and they weren't suitable. So potholder rugs can be made out of all of that stuff. So if it's got holes, if it's got stains, if it's polyester or some kind of fiber that you don't particularly care for next to your skin, you can totally use those for this process. You can also use wool and cashmere and whatever else you might have. It doesn't have to be damaged, but it certainly works just fine if it is. So I want to get started by asking you guys a couple of questions. The first question, if you could just answer these in the comments, it'll really help me kind of formulate how to go through today's session and tomorrow's session too. Do you guys have excessive clothing in your life? Do you have clothing in the back of your closet? Do you have kids that have outgrown clothing that you've held on to? If you could just type, yes, I have clothing, or no, I'm looking for clothing, that would be super helpful. Do you have, maybe an elderly parent who has passed away and left behind a bunch of clothing? Any kind of used clothing. Yes, Virginia Roach. Hey, Okay, cool. So it looks like I'm getting a few yeses here. Okay, so yeah, if anybody, yes, a basement full. I know, I feel your pain, girl. I feel your pain. And let me just tell you that once you get going with this process, it's your excessive clothing is it's gonna turn into something that you actually are gonna be. You're gonna see it in a whole new light. Like this process, actually, you're gonna wind up with some beautiful rugs that you made, but it's also gonna address all that excess that you might have in your life. And if you don't have a lot of excessive clothing in your life, it's a really good way to help other people with that. Our culture is full. I mean, okay, you're driving around and you see those self-storage units, you guys, like they're all full of stuff, right? Like they have self-storage units because it's a business and those people make money. So if you think about that for a minute, people pay hundreds of dollars to store stuff that they don't have time to use. So this is a really great way of putting some of that stuff to use. So we're going to talk about how to collect material if you don't have it, and how to sort the material that you do have so that you have the rug that you want to make. Awesome. So let's see. The other question I want to ask is, do you have a specific rug in mind? And if you could say specific or let's see, how would you answer this? Because if you say yes or no, I'm going to get them mixed up with the previous answer. So if you have a specific rug in mind that's a specific color or size, and you have a space in your house that you're imagining that this perfect rug is going to go, let me know. Say, yes, I have a specific rug in mind, or no, I'm just interested in learning. That would be super helpful. And somebody's been collecting t-shirts for this project for years. This is awesome, you guys. I am so excited. This is like, so the other thing that happens with the rugs, right, is like you start looking at used clothing as a whole new thing. Like all of a sudden, instead of it being like, oh my God, what am I gonna do with all this crap in my life? You look at it as like, oh my gosh, I have this opportunity to use all of this stuff that I've been toting around with me for maybe years to make something beautiful and creative and useful. And suddenly your whole way of seeing materials for your creativity changes, right? Because you walk into a thrift store and all of a sudden it becomes this treasure trove of like possibility, where prior it might have just been like a bunch of old clothing. So this is so exciting. So let's see. Yes, I have a dream rug. Okay. Okay, cool. Rainbow rug. All right, cool. Okay, great. So let's start talking about the materials involved. So materials can be any kind of used clothing that's stretchy, okay? And in today's world, if you look down on your body and see what you're wearing and just see, like, most clothing today is stretchy. So like skinny jeans, you know, even the woven, like if you're right around my age, I don't know, I'm 55. Suddenly, holy moly. But when I was a kid in high school, I remember girls wearing like super tight, like Jordache jeans. Does anybody else remember that? Oh, it was painful. I tried it, and it was just one try, and I was like, you know what? This is not my thing. So, but there was no give. There was no stretch. It was just like 100% cotton. There was no stretch. It was really uncomfortable. And, you know, since then, we've had the advent of spandex and the stretchy fibers they can mix with a woven fabric so that, you know, stretchy, like skinny jeans and such are really not uncomfortable. So they can totally be used. With that said, most stretchy material is knitted, and I'm just going to go through some things here. So this is, you know, sweatshirt, just regular old like hoodie. We have sweaters, you know, short sleeve. It doesn't matter. Sleeve length is totally irrelevant. Single socks, like you got a bucket of single socks at your house, because I know I do. And every couple of years I go through that whole laundry basket and I start slicing and I start making rugs, and inevitably, like 2 days later, all of a sudden, oh, there's those 3 other socks. If I had those last week, I could have paired them up, but too late now. Those socks are in a rug. Long sleeve t-shirts work great. Something like that. You know, color is totally up to you. Even sport bras, okay? Like any, like we're talking like really any stretchy fabrics. T-shirts, basic t-shirts. Okay, they can, this one's solid colored. It has a little insignia here, but you can have them with a print. Let me see what else I got over here. Sweaters. This is like a wool turtleneck. Who ever heard of a wool turtleneck that's comfortable? Just asking. Like, ugh, I hate turtlenecks anyway, but like wool? No, thank you. Let's make a rug. Long sleeve t-shirts. This is another one, solid colored. So you can, the sky is actually the limit. There's even like, you know, odd shaped things that you might not, don't really fall into a category, but like this is a little dress I found that's stretchy, so that'll work just fine. Cardigans. Now, let me just tell you that cardigans are a little bit more difficult. They're more involved to use because they're open in the front, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But really, like, okay, here's a t-shirt with a print. No problem, that's totally get used. All right, so what you're gonna do, so materials, okay, right now we're, just in case you weren't aware, there's a pandemic going on. And I'm a little hesitant about being around a lot of people right now. I don't really want to go to the thrift store, and I don't really want to be out around people. And I also don't really want to handle clothing that I'm not sure where it came from. I'm not sure if it's clean or dirty or whatever. So, and I think I'm a little bit like overcautious because I really actually have been to the thrift store a few times since COVID, but I've been laying low just a little bit more lately just because of the new strains that we're seeing and whatever. So we're going to talk a little bit about material collection that has to do, that will keep you away from the thrift stores, but will also get you the material that you want. So to prove my point, a couple weeks ago, I put a post out on my Facebook, and I said, hey, if anybody has brightly colored clothing, I want to make a rainbow rug for my masterclass, which is coming up starting on Friday, or actually not starting on Friday, but tomorrow you'll learn more about that. And if you have brightly colored, stretchy clothing that you're not using and you don't mind sending me, I would love to use it for that. Well, within the next, I posted it once, now taken, I know, I have quite a following on Facebook and on Instagram, but I made one post on my Facebook, and I think I got about 30 or 40, 35 pounds of goods that all are exactly what I was looking for. So the brightly colored things that I showed you here, these all came in boxes from people who paid the shipping and took the time out of their schedule to ship me clothing that they're not using. And they were so thankful. They sent me the nicest cards without exception. Every single package came with a beautifully thoughtful card because they're so happy that they could give their old clothing to someone who is actually going to be able to use it. So I'm just going to suggest to you guys, if you're out there in the world where you're interacting with anyone, whether it's, you know, it could be your family, it could be your sisters, your brothers, your, parents, whatever. If you have people in your life that you interact with, ask them for clothing, and you need to be very specific. And that's one of the things that I want to like really kind of put some shine a light on that, because if you tell people that you want old clothing, you're going to get things you don't really want. Okay. So I was really specific. I said, I want brightly colored, stretchy clothing that you're no longer using. So I got a really amazing, I mean, honestly, like I will say, well, if you're in my masterclass, you'll see a lot more of that brightly colored clothing, but it's a really great way just to call out and ask your friends. I have a little swipe file that I created for you guys. So if you're on my email list for the Potholder Rug Lab, you'll get that as part of your blog post this evening in your inbox, just to help you word that so that you'll get what you want, because you do want to be very specific. So before you know what exactly you want to ask for, you want to think about what your rug is going to look like, right? Like if you have that dream rug in mind, you already have an idea. Is it bright green or yellow, or is it a mix, or is it a rainbow? So as your design is in your mind, you want to be, okay, I want purple stretchy clothing, okay? And let me just back up a minute and tell you that, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm really interested in the environmental aspects of everything that I do. So the average United States person, every citizen in this country, throws away over 80 pounds of clothing annually. So of that, 15%, 15, not 50, but 15% is recycled. So there's 85% of the clothing that's discarded in this culture gets landfilled. So if you can help somebody recycle a tiny little bit of that, you're doing a great job. You're not only are you making a beautiful rug, but you're teaching the person who's helping you by giving you their old clothing that it's not necessary to throw that into the landfill. So it's really like there's all these kind of ripples that happen with Potholder rugs that initially you don't really think about it, but then once you get started, you're like, oh my gosh, like I just taught 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 1,000 people that they could do something different rather than throwing a usable thing into the garbage or into the landfill. They can actually help you create beautiful rugs. Okay, so that's something that I like every day. I'm like, that's just the coolest thing ever. So yeah, don't be shy. People are very thankful to have a place to put something that that's no longer serving them, that's going to be used. Okay. So now before you, another thing to consider before you start figuring out what to ask your friends and family for, if that's the route you're taking, is, you know, obviously you're thinking about color, you're thinking about availability, and you're thinking about texture, okay? So when I say availability, I'm talking about how often do you find the particular garment. Like when I started my business back in 1987, before I was born, I used wool sweaters. That was like 95% of what I made was wool sweaters. And the rugs I made were made out of wool sweaters, and the clothing I made was made out of wool sweaters. And then right around the time, I think it was like 92, early 90s, polar fleece was introduced. And polar fleece kind of really changed the way people made warm clothing. So the amount of wool sweaters that you find in the thrift store has really diminished over the years. There's not, you know, it used to be like you could just find tons of wool sweaters, and a lot of the sweaters were discarded because they were shrunk. They were not, you know, carefully laundered, and they shrank. They didn't fit the person any longer, so then they were in the thrift store, and shrunk sweaters work perfect for this. So wool sweaters are not as easy to come by as they have been in the past, but they work really great for this process. And wool is nice and kind of fluffy and buoyant. It's kind of, it has a little bit more loft than, say, a cotton t-shirt. And the other thing that's interesting about wool, which is really kind of hard for people to understand sometimes, is that wool is actually a much lighter, like physically lighter, not as heavy as cotton. So if you make this sweater into loops for your Potholder rug, those loops are going to physically weigh less than loops that you would cut out of a t-shirt or some kind of a knit that's like a t-shirt type of knit. Okay, so if you want, so those two different fibers, wool and cotton, have different attributes. So cotton is very absorbent. Wool kind of repels water. It doesn't really absorb water that easily. Cotton is very prevalent. You can find t-shirts in any thrift store, in most people's closets. There's always t-shirts, like dime a dozen. You can find them everywhere, whereas wool sweaters are more difficult to find. The other thing that works great for this process are fleeces, like polar fleece. Oh, Sylvie, we're on the same page. You can totally use polar fleece. It's really great because it, again, similar to wool, it has that like nice loft and squishy factor. So it really works nicely. And the thing I want to really say, I'm trying to think of the word. Anyway, the thing that's important to remember is that, of course, you can mix fiber. You can mix wool, polar fleece, cotton, and mix it all together. If you make a solid cotton rug, you're going to have a much heavier rug, physically more heavy rug, more dense, more, it's physically not as soft and squishy. but you certainly can, and it depends on where you want to use it. If it's a high traffic area where people are going to be traveling across that rug a lot, cotton is great because it's like heavier, it's denser, it's not as easy to wear out. But if you're putting the rug next to the bed where you get out of bed in the morning with bare feet, you might want to make it out of something soft and squishy. It's really personal preference, and it also has a lot to do with what's available to you. So, does anybody have any questions? Let's see. Polar fleece, yep, you can use that. Let's see if I'm just going to scroll back and see if I got any questions here that I'm not. Where did you find the manufacturer that's getting rid of clothes? Where did you find the manufacturer? The manufacturer, Mary, I think you must have misunderstood me. I don't use new clothing. I use old used clothing. That's Bellstar says try your local buy nothing group on Facebook too. That's a really great suggestion. There's you know, when the kids are in school, you can put a note in the school, the public library. There's all sorts of places that you can really look for clothing. And honestly, I mean, you'll see once you get started how thankful people are about having an opportunity to kind of offload some of the things that are weighing them down, and also, you know, help you. So the other thing that I just have some notes here that I like to try to make sure I don't skip over anything. The other thing that's great, if you get right into this and you're really looking for a lot of material, if you go to your local thrift store, whether it's a Goodwill, Salvation Army, or some, like, you know, Red Cross, whatever, a lot of donations that are given to a thrift store are not saleable, right? So people who give away a sweater with a big stain on the front, or, you know, a hole, or the sleeve, they're misshapen, you know, there's a hole in the elbow, whatever. Those clothes are not going to get resold by that thrift store, and they're perfectly fine for using for potholder rugs. So if you have a connection to any store like that, you can certainly ask there if they would be able to save you material, or if you could go and pick it up from them before they put it into the dumpster. The again, you want to be specific. You don't want to have piles of materials that are not suitable that then you have to turn around and figure out what to do with. So have that rug in mind, whatever rug you want to make, and really hone in on exactly what you need to do that. And once you have that first rug made, you can kind of decide where to go next from there. If you want to accumulate a bunch of material and have kind of a palette like a painter, so that you can make custom rugs in the colors that, you know, till your heart's content, you can do that. But if you are more specific and more focused for that first one, it'll really help you not get overwhelmed with material, because as soon as people start knowing that you take material in, you will get material. I have to tell you a funny story. Not that long ago, people leave donations on my porch. And a couple weeks ago, my daughter takes her school here in my studio, so that, you know, she's on Zoom school. And I heard somebody drive out the driveway, and I said, Lucy, who just left? And she's like, oh, I don't know. It was some man. She was sitting by the window. She's like, some man. I don't know who he was. So I went downstairs to look, you know, did he leave something? And sure enough, there's a bag of clothing on my porch. And I was like, oh, cool. You know, it's a donation, whatever. We'll use it for rugs. Well, it was a bag full of like double D size bras, which I can't really use for rugs. I was just like, so when you ask people for clothing, be sure you're not asking for the double D size bras or whatever. Like, I mean, you know, sports bras you can use for this, but you do want to be very specific. I have lots of stories about weird clothes people have given me. So, at any rate, let's see. Can you mix fabrics? You totally can mix fabrics, Karen. That was your question. Free Cycle is a great place to look. That's another great idea. A whole bunch of places on the... there's a whole bunch of places on Facebook, like different groups, and they're mentioned in the comments. So if anybody's not familiar, scroll down through there, and whoever posted the comment might be able to even post a link to, if they have like a group that's, you know, that would be appropriate to contact. Or you can put a call out, right? Like you can put a call out on your own Facebook. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of people to really garner a lot of material. Seriously. Okay. So once you get your material whether you're thrift store shopping for it, or if you're gathering it from friends and family or your community, whatever, the first thing you want to do is wash it. And you can actually request that it is freshly laundered when you start putting a call out. And actually, I do that because washing a lot of clothing, it takes time. And if most people are happy to freshly launder their clothing. So bring it into your home. The first thing you do, like when I go thrift store shopping now, I haven't been in a while, but my process is I put the clothing in a contractor bag and I tie it up tight in the store. I bring it into my home, actually into my studio, and I put it from the contractor bag into the washing machine, hot wash, cold rinse, lots of soap, just like regular laundry soap. Whatever you use for your regular laundry is perfectly fine. And then right into a hot dryer. And if I have too much material in that plastic bag to fit into one load, I tie it right back up again. Years ago, my son and I had a terrible experience with bed bugs that came from a thrift store. So just don't let that be you. It was really, really hard. It took a lot to get rid of the bed bugs. And the other thing are moths. So, moths like to eat wool. Their favorite food is cashmere. So, if somebody gives you a bag full of moth-infested wool and you open it up in your house and you have a wool blanket on your bed, if you're not careful, those moths are going to get into everything that you have that's wool. So just general rule of thumb, keep it in a closed plastic bag, wash machine, dryer, and then you're good. The wash machine and dryer, the hot wash, cold rinse, and then hot dryer will do away with any kind of bed bugs or moths. So that's just a good process to just get used to that. And especially if you take this to the next level and you want to really start making a lot of rugs, it's just a really good idea to have that be part of your process. And, the sweaters that might be wool, or the garments that you might be using that could be wool, if they shrink, it doesn't matter. Like, this process is very forgiving. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's shrunk, now I can't use it. It's totally fine. And the other thing that happens when you wash your materials first is that, of course, then your rug is washable because it's already been shrunk. Okay. How's everybody doing? Does anybody have any questions? Oh no, not my wool turtleneck. Karen, if you wear wool turtlenecks, I don't know, like maybe you should get like a Nobel Peace Prize or something, because just that wool, like, itchy. How much material or how many pieces are we talking about for a mid-size rug? Okay, good. Let's go. Let's talk about volume. So I do 3-size looms here. Okay, and this loom makes this is my smallest size loom. I call it a chair pad loom, and it makes about a 17-inch square. Of course, it depends on your weaving tension as to how big it comes out, but generally speaking, that size weighs just a little bit more than a pound, like 1.5 pounds per chair pad, right? This size rug, which is our medium size, it's like 20 by 30 inches, takes about 4 or 5 pounds per rug. That's how much the rug weighs when it's finished, okay? And then the 2.5 by 3.5 foot size weighs about 9 pounds, 8 or 9 pounds. So this is that size. Can you tell it's my new favorite rug? Because I keep showing the rainbow rug, but there's other ones too. Let me show you this one. This is a really popular color. I call this color is called oatmeal, and it's just kind of all a mix of like kind of very soft, very light neutrals, and mostly kind of ivories and creams, and a lot of that heather kind of sweatshirt material. So they weigh that size, that 2.5 by 3.5 foot size weighs about 8 or 9 pounds. So if you figure out the 2.5 by 3.5 feet equals 8.75 square feet. So if you budget yourself for 1 pound of material per square foot of rug that you're making, you'll have enough material. Okay. Now, I tend to overcompensate. I tend to say, okay, well, if I'm making a 5 by 7 foot rug, I'm going to get 40 pounds of material. So that way I have more color choices. So I figure out, okay, 35 square feet, 5 by 7 feet, 35 square feet, a pound per, it's going to give me 35 pounds. I'm going to go for 40 pounds. That way, if I want that little piece of like an accent turquoise color somewhere, and I'll have choices, and I'm not like right down to the last bottom of the barrel when I'm finishing my rug. Are you still, guys? Somebody just said the live stream suddenly stopped. I hope it didn't suddenly stop. Are you guys there? Somebody shoot me a comment and let me know. Maribel Sanchez is watching. Hey, Maribel. Aw. Oh no. She's got it. Does flannel work? Flannel is a woven fabric, you guys, and flannel, so it'll be a little ravelly and it's not stretchy. If you have stretchy flannel, which I haven't seen, but there could be stretchy flannel out there, I think stretchy flannel would work. But okay, good. Oh, Maribel. So Maribel Sanchez, who's actually watching my video right now, worked for me years ago back in Housatonic, Massachusetts. And she finished all the stuff that left my studio. So she was like the last person to quality check everything. And she just did such a good job. So it's so nice to see you here. Yay! And Edwin, her beautiful husband, they're so, in her family. So give everybody in your family love from me, Maribel. Okay, so back to rug making. Okay, so that's going to give you an approximate weight. Now, when I started telling you that like wool is lighter than cotton, if you make a 100% cotton rug out of all, say you're using all t-shirts, your weight might be a little bit heavier. So if you're making like a 3x5 foot rug, you might want to go like 45 pounds to get enough material to have color choice at the end. But you'll see, and you'll get started, and 9 times out of 10, people really have way more material than they need. So don't worry too much about that. Okay, so the different attributes we talked about a little bit. So, cotton's hard, dense, not, it's absorbent. It's great for like bathrooms. It's great for like entryways where like you might be taking off snowy boots if you live near me. The wool rug's nice for bare feet, nice for like living spaces where it's not like super high traffic, but it's nice and soft. So let's think about acrylic. Let's think about nylon. Acrylic is going to be similar to wool. It's kind of like a synthetic wool, right? Like that's how they started making acrylic. So anything that's kind of sweatery like that is going to have similar attributes to wool. Whereas like modal or bamboo or tencel or rayon are going to be more like cotton. So they're going to have more like the dense, the more absorbent kinds of qualities to them. So if you use that type of fabric, that's the type of rug you'll have as well. And again, it's totally fine, 100% fine to mix your fiber. And most of the rugs that I make today, I would even say all of the rugs I make today are really a mixed gamut of different fibers that all play nicely together. Like this particular rug has a really varied mix. T-shirts, sweatshirts, sweaters. I'm not sure how easy it is for you guys to decipher the textures through the video, but really a lot of different textures. There's some that's like really fuzzy, like mohairy kind of things. There's some with like a little bit of actual like gold sparkle to them. So all of that is kind of fun to mix in. Okay. So how many t-shirts for a mid-size rug? Okay, so a t-shirt, like my husband is a big guy. He's like 6'4". We call him Biggie. He's like a good 275. His shirts are an extra large tall. They weigh a pound, sometimes more, but a pound. Generally like a large size men's wool sweater weighs about a pound. A t-shirt that I wear, maybe it weighs like 8 ounces. So, when you're asking how many t-shirts, figure out what's your kind of medium size, like what's the average size of the t-shirts that you've got compiled. And then you can kind of weigh one and see like how much, do you have a little food scale or a little like postal scale? You can just weigh a t-shirt and go, okay, well, this is kind of the average size. So it's 10 ounces. Okay. So then if you need, a pound of material per square foot, you can kind of figure out. There's a little bit of math involved. Do acrylic and cotton sweaters that do not felt unravel when you cut them into strips? That's a really good question, Candy. Hi, Candy. I'm so glad you could tune back in here. We had to reschedule this today, so I'm glad you were able to hop on live. They do tend to unravel a little bit more than a felted wool sweater, but for this process, they kind of work out okay. Once in a while, like highly unusual, but once in a while I do find a knitted garment. Like normally they're cotton sweaters that have like a large gauge knit. When you cut them, they just really do unravel, and they're just not that durable. And you know, sometimes you wind up cutting a sweater and you go, oh, this is just not going to work. And then you just have to not use it. So there is a little bit of, you know, just experimentation that happens with this process. What size pieces do you need to make the strips? Good question. So you could have, I'm going to show you about my tools. So somebody had asked earlier about cutting and about sore hands, and about, she actually said her hands were old. My hands are, I don't like to say my hands are old because I don't feel old, but my hands have been working really hard for a really long time. So I use rotary cutters to do the bulk of my cutting for Potholder Rugs. You don't need to make an investment in a rotary cutter if you don't have one, but you can totally use like a nice sharp pair of scissors. I used scissors for years before I discovered rotary cutters. And then I also have like a big industrial, it's called a clicker press that cuts. So, you know, I don't think any of you guys have a clicker press in your living room, but if you do, go ahead and use it. Sometime I'll do a little video of my clicker press so you can see what it looks like. But these rotary cutters are actually, they're made by a company called Olfa, and I am not associated with Olfa in any way, but maybe I should be because I think I sell a ton of these for that company. These are two different sizes. This rotary cutter costs, I think it's like $60. They're like ridiculously expensive. The blades are replaceable. The blades are also quite expensive. If you're using a lot of like bulky, thick wool knits or thick sweatshirts, the bigger rotary blade is nice to have. But this rotary blade is pretty good for everything. I mean, it's, you know, this is like an extra, like, yeah, okay, if you're using bulky knits, use this. But most things can cut easily with this. Yes, and these come with a mat. So when you buy a rotary cutter, there's like a kit you can purchase. Let me just show you. I have one right here. I'm just going to get up and grab it. Hold on one sec. All right, so normally rotary cutters come with this ruler or something like this. This is made by, actually this is a Fisker's ruler that it came with a different rotary cutter. And then there's a mat this mat is, it's hard to see, but it's hard to see, but there's like a grid that's measured out on this mat. And it's made out of plastic there. You can see it here more easily. It's made out of plastic. It's pretty firm, but pretty pliable. And that normally you can buy. When you buy a rotary cutter, it'll come with a ruler and with a mat. And one of the things I've established over time is those mats that you buy with your rotary cutter are designed to dull your blades. And I'm sorry, I am not a conspiracist. But I can tell you that the mat I have, which I bought at an art supply store, it's called a self-healing mat. And it's designed to use for like cutting mats for like framing pictures or whatever. They're much less hard on your blades. So if this is a process that you're like really into and you want to do this for like the long haul, I would recommend buying a rotary cutter, not in a kit, and getting a self-healing mat from your local art supply store, or you could probably order them from Amazon or somewhere. But the mats that come with the Olfa or the Fisker's rotary cutters are, you can even feel it. It almost feels like an emery board. The surface of it has like a little granulation to it, and it's really, it tends to dull the blade. The blades are also, you can buy those, individually, separately from the cutters. They're quite expensive. I have a bunch of resources that I use to buy my tools and materials that are, I'll share with my masterclass when that gets going. But in the meantime, like, you can totally Google it up online and find alternatives to the expensive rotary blades that might be for sale in your local craft shop. Okay, so how's everybody doing? As cutting strips, okay, yeah, so you want to keep your strips tubular, and I call them loops. So over here I have a box full of loops that I've already cut. And so this is a loop, and it looks like a little flat piece of fabric because it's very thin, but these are all circles, right? And there's another one here. So when you get your fabric, you're gonna take your material and your garments that you're using to cut. And actually this turtleneck is a great example. You can cut the bottom, you're gonna cut straight across the bottom, and you're gonna cut a sweater of this weight, like maybe 2.5 inches wide. So like from my index finger straight across to the other index finger. It doesn't matter. Like this is not a precision at all. There's no, like, you don't have to measure. You don't have to be like, oh my gosh, it's not exactly straight. Like it really doesn't matter. Then you're going to cut that. Then you're going to cut another loop that's, you know, up higher, and you're just going to go straight up to the armpits. You're going to cut straight across. And with this sweater, I'm going to say you could probably get 4, maybe 5 loops from the armpit to the hem of that sweater. Just rolling your rotary cutter or cutting with your scissors just straight across the width of that garment. Okay. Then you're going to work on your sleeves, and you can do the same thing, and you're going to cut them about the same width. So like, you know, that's a good width for this particular type of fabric. And when I'm saying it's a good width for this particular type of fabric, if the fabric is thin, like this red t-shirt I was looking at earlier, this is it's almost like a tissue weight jersey, right? Like you can almost, like you can actually see through it, right? So you're going to cut that one wider, like much wider. So it's about the same bulk when you pull it, when you pull that loop, it's going to give you about the same bulk as the wool. Okay. Again, it really doesn't matter. Like it's fine. And if you look at the rugs, you can tell some of these strips are wider than others. Like there's a little, see right here, this little strip right here looks like it was quite a bit narrower than the one next to it. Okay, so you can, they vary, and it's kind of part of the intrinsic beauty of the rug. And yes, the rotary cutters are very similar to pizza cutters. And, you know, you could probably just use one tool for both things. I'm not sure. So when you get your sleeves cut and you get your body cut, then you've got this like rectangular piece that's like a dickie with the wool turtleneck. Well, then you can cut the wool turtleneck, right? You can just do the same thing across there. You're going to have, you know, cut it right here. You could probably get 3 loops out of this. And if, okay, so then the seam of the turtleneck is like right here, but you know, if you got 1 loop here, 1 loop there, and then all of a sudden you got just this little bit, well, then you can just cut it like with a little bit of a curve down into that part, right? And then you can cut the next one so that you're curving even down here. So the loops don't have to be like perfectly straight and even. They can be kind of wonky. Let me show you. Hold on a second. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah, okay, so this loop was probably cut. So do you see how there's like a label back here where the label got cut off, and then there's like shoulder seams? So you can see it's kind of like almost like a C shape or a U shape. That's totally fine. And then you can just stretch it out, and it's okay, like that little bit of flop and like give to it, and the little kind of almost like a ruffle. It's really not going to do any harm at all to your rug. It's just going to be. This is a polar fleece cuff, so you can see that that's got a lot of bulk to it, where this not as quite as much, but it's totally fine. And look at those 2 colors, like they're very close, but the textural difference is really nice. So to put those 2 together would be awesome. Okay, so then we're going to talk about loop joining. And this is really, oh wait, before we go to loop joining, I just want to show you one last thing about making loops. And okay, socks, actually there's a couple last things. So you're going to cut these, same thing, just cut straight across, get to the heel. It doesn't, just pretend the heel's not even there, and you can cut the loops right down. You'll have like a little kind of oval shaped thing like that where the toe was, but and that's going to be your only piece of scrap from a sock. Cardigans or anything that's open in the front, if you have like a little zipper or any kind of like opening in the front, what I do is I take the buttons off, and I have a cardigan here somewhere. Let me see if I can put my hand on it quick. Yeah, here it is. So here's the cardigan. So what I would do in this instance is I would take my buttons off, because they're really kind of nice shell buttons on this cardigan. I take all the buttons off anyway, whether they're nice or not. And then when you go to sew your cardigan up to make that into a closed front garment so you can create loops, you're not going to have to worry about avoiding buttons, okay? You won't break a needle or whatever. So you're just going to sew that up with your sewing machine. It does not matter what color thread. It doesn't matter what, you know, if it's neat or tidy, because it's going to be woven into your rug. You're really not going to see the finish of that seam. But you do want to use kind of a small stitch so that when you go to cut across your garment, it won't pull apart. The other thing that's kind of cool is if you have vests, you know, like sweater vests, you can sew the armholes closed and then just cut straight across all the way up to as high as the neck goes. Okay. Okay. Is there a target or diameter to try for? I'm visualizing like how you measure spaghetti. Oh, you mean like the fatness of the loop? That is actually really up to you. And you know, if you make fat loops that are really bulky, you're going to end up with a bigger rug than if you make thin loops, because when you take your rug off the loom, if the loops are thin, it's going to shrink in more. So it's sort of like the combination of the width of your loops and the tension of your weave is going to dictate the size of your finished rug. And it's very much like weaving. It's sort of like a personal preference. If you like the bulky loops and you like to weave nice and tight, then you're going to wind up with like a beautiful, large, square-cornered, thick rug. Whereas if you're trying to make something a little bit thinner, maybe a little bit less bulky, you can make thinner strips, and then you're going to wind up with a slightly smaller rug, but it'll still be super, super beautiful and useful. So, that is a cool thing to know about your rug loops. The variation really does have a lot to do with the size of the finish. If you're going to cut something like this, like a little sports bra, you can just cut it straight across. So like where my fingers are, you're going to cut from one end to the other, just straight across there. You probably get 2 loops out of this piece. And there might be a little bit of waste left over, but at least the whole thing wasn't waste. Okay. So how about let's talk about joining. Does that answer your question, Cheryl? I think I got it. I think I answered your question. So now this is really the only thing that you need to know from me forever. This is it. This is the only thing you really need to know about Potholder Rugs, is joining your loops. Okay. So if you have, this is the most common question I get. How do you make the loops fit on the looms? Like, I don't get it. I got all these t-shirts. What happens if they're not the right size for the loom? So you're going to take your loops, and when you cut your sleeves, you're going to have loops like I showed you. Like this is a cuff loop from a fleece, so they're narrow, right? And you're also going to have loops that are super wide. Let me see if I can find one here. That are, from the bottom of a t-shirt. So how do you work that? I know Lucy, right? She's like trying to get it on video. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 loops and you're going to loop them together like that. Can you see that? Okay. And I'm going to do that again because it's actually very simple, but, my daughters, I have 2 of them. They're both like making mischief. They're downstairs conjuring up something. I hope they might actually show up behind me and, quietly, so I won't know. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, there they are. Okay. 2 loops. One, you're going to pull opposite and opposite, and you're just going to pull one through the other. You can practice this with rubber bands. It's kind of like, if you leave your rubber bands unattended and my kids come visit you, they're all going to be looped together into one big, long rubber band loop. So when you go to pull one out, it's going to be like the whole loop. Okay, so you have these 2 looped together, and it's still not going to be long enough to go through, what about that big loom you were showing us the other day? How's that going to work? So then you can take a 3rd loop, and you can loop that one through. So I'm going to do this a little differently this time. So I've got the small loop, the purple one's going through the red, and I'm just going to reach through the purple and pull the red. See how that is? Okay, so now I have 3. Okay.
I'm stealing one of your extra masks.
Oh, okay. Now, if you can keep doing this. So if you're recycling single socks, because that's what you have available to you, you can just add on and add on and add on. Okay, so Faye, she gets the question of the question of the year. People often ask that, like, what happens with all these knots? It's going to be like big and bulky, and my rug is going to be like a mess. It's going to be all weird. It's not going to be all weird. The knots and the joints of the loops fall right into place. You're going to weave them in. You're going to ignore them. You're not going to pay a bit of attention to those knots, and you're going to have this beautiful rug. And I think I said this the other day, but I'll say it again for anybody who's joining for the first time. So I just want to point out here's a knot. It's hard for me to do this from this angle, but there's knots all through this rug, okay? And what happens is you start using your rug, and like a braided rug, all of a sudden you've been using it a couple months and it becomes like this flat, smooth plane, and it's not as bumpy and as thick as it started out being. So there's really, the knots don't cause a problem. They actually add character and texture to the rug and kind of gives it that intrinsic kind of potholder rug look. So there's no harm in using small loops. When I ran my production company, my guys that made rugs, and actually if you look on the photos I've been posting, there's this really sweet picture of this dear man, his name is Juan, with his daughter, Raina. It's like the picture's a few years old. I think Raina's like 12 now. But he made rugs for me for 10 years, and he did not like using those little loops because they took a long time. It takes much longer to make those, to make a chain of loops than it does to just stretch a large loop. So I often had to do a little finger wagging and say, Juan, you got to use those little loops. They are not garbage. The other thing I want to point out while we're talking about loops is that this loop was cut and then it broke apart when I went to stretch it to put it on the loom. So you can just stitch that right back up. You don't need to worry about throwing that out or having that be waste, because you can just stitch it up. And what I do is, as I'm weaving, if I have pieces that either didn't make it into a loop, like they became one long piece instead of a loop, I toss those all into a pile, and then later I'll go sit at my sewing machine and zip those all through at the same time, so I don't have to stop and start as much. And while we're on that subject, I just want to say that you don't want to not like physically tie knots in your material, because they come out. The only kind of knot that you want to have in your potholder rug is this type. Okay, if you do like an overhand or a square knot, over time, vacuuming, cleaning, using that rug, that knot is going to come out. And because of the scale of these rugs, if you lose like the integrity of one loop, all of a sudden you're going to have a pile of loops instead of a finished rug. So it's really important that the only type of knot you see is this, okay? So now once you can gather your material, you can start cutting your material, and you can start looping your material together to fit on your frame loom. So you're going to stretch all your weft. It's going to go right across your loom, and you're going to make it nice and taut so that it's a nice even texture from top to bottom or from side to side. I actually recommend putting your warp on vertically. So when I'm talking about warp, I'm talking about, this is my warp. Oh, I'm going to put this on. And actually this piece I just made is actually a little too long for this loom, so I'm just going to stretch it tight and put it there and have that, I'll take that extra loop off at the bottom. But this is like about how tight you want them. You don't want them super tight, and you don't want them to be like baggy loose. And then so you're just going to load your loom up like that, and then you're going to weave across horizontally, starting from the bottom and packing it down and then weaving to the top. Okay, so Karen has a question about making the rugs. Okay, so how do you make the rugs non-slippery? The rugs are not slippery. These rugs are quite heavy, and I don't use an under carpet mat or anything like that to keep them in place. I have these rugs all over my own home, and I have actually used them for many years in my studio, and I've actually never used a non-slip mat under them. They are heavy, and they're also, if you have a rug that is like, let's just say you're making a rug out of polar fleece and wool, it's really buoyant and light, and it's going on it's going onto a very smooth floor somewhere in your home, and it's not going to have furniture on it to kind of anchor it. How do you keep that in place? You could probably use one of those like rubbery kind of grids that you see at like the home goods store or whatever carpeting store you might go to, but I honestly have not had that be an issue in my life. So I don't really think that it's going to be an issue for you. Does anybody else have any more questions? How do you make them fit the loom? I just said that, didn't I? So you're going to make your loops together. You're going to put your loops into a loop. It might actually be worthwhile to go back and watch if you just tuned in. I'm sorry, I didn't. So you loop the loops together, and that way you can make it as long or as short. And like I just said, that this one is a little bit too long for the loom I had it on. So I'm just going to take off this fourth loop and just go with the three. And I'm just going to stretch it right across there and have it be this kind of tension, you know. It's not too tight and it's not too loose. And you want to have your tension be quite even across. Okay? So I think that is pretty much what I have to talk to you guys about today. So on the PDFs for today, there is a swipe file for asking for materials from your community or from your friends and family, so you can use my words and have that be maybe a little helpful for you when gathering information or gathering material. And I also made a bunch of cut diagrams for different kinds of garments of how to most efficiently use them. So your waste factor should be like somewhere between 5 and 10%. So if you are making a rug, like, and I probably should have said this earlier, but if you're making a rug that's like, say, 35 square feet, like we talked about earlier, it's going to weigh 35 pounds when you're done. You're going to buy or use, 40 pounds of fabric because you do have a little bit of waste. So that is just a good way to figure it. Okay. Somebody said, aha. I think that was Alice. I love that. Okay. And somebody else had a light bulb moment. There's never enough of those in my life. Yeah, and you can use the straps to make a mask. I think you were talking about the sports bra. Does the spacing of the nails on the loom impact low, open, or close, or how open or closed the weave is? It does to a degree, Sarah. We did a whole section on looms yesterday, I was on Tuesday, and the looms that I make and sell their screws are set 1 inch apart. So rather than setting the screws different distances apart, I make sure that my loops are cut in such a way that they work with the 1 inch distance. I think I got the, let's see. I think I've got all the questions that came in today answered. If you do think of other questions or are confused in any way, please just leave a comment in the feed on Facebook later. I'll get to it. And if you are not on my Potholder Rug Lab mailing list, I will put a comment below this live feed on Facebook for you guys, so you'll know how to get there to sign up for that. So you'll get the email in your inbox this evening with all the information that we talked about. And I will be back tomorrow. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that tomorrow at noon, on Friday, noon Eastern Standard Time, I will be live here on Facebook as well as on Instagram. And tomorrow we're going to talk all about alternative uses for rugs, how to finish your rugs, and I'm going to also talk to you about my offer for the masterclass. It's a 5-week long deep dive into like the magic that is Potholder Rugs. So I look forward to seeing you guys then. And if you have any questions, like I said, just post them in the comments. Have a great rest of your day.